All right, the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are two glands that sit on top of the kidney. Okay, so this little dude that's sitting on top of the kidney right there, that's going to be the adrenal gland. So it's located above the kidney. It's surrounded by actually abundant adipose tissue and connective tissue. It's got a capsule, so it's its own organ. And it has a very abundant blood supply. And if you think about it, that makes sense because if it's releasing hormones into the blood, it would need to have that. So I talked about this earlier, cortex versus medulla. Medulla always means middle, cortex always means outside. So if you look over here, this little dark area in the middle is going to be the medulla. This area out here is going to be the cortex. So the cortex itself actually has three layers to it: the zona glomerulosa, the zona fasciculata, and the zona reticularis. The inner core is just called the medulla. Now, each of these layers, medulla, glomerulosa, fasciculata, reticularis, is functionally and structurally different from each other. Okay, what they do, how they work, it's all very specialized. So, looking at the adrenal gland, you've got the medulla, you've got the cortex, zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, zona reticularis. The medulla is what's responsible for secreting epi and norepi. Now, we just talked about epi and norepi in our autonomic nervous system chapter 16. As far as function, it's not that different. It goes to the heart, it goes to the blood vessels, it goes to the liver, and it goes to the fat cells. So, when do we release this? It's in response to physical activity. Again, there's a bear in the parking lot actually works for this, because if there's a bear in the parking lot, are you going to turn around and run, or are you going to punch the bear in the face? Okay. It increases your cardiac output. If I put a huge surge of adrenaline into your body, it's going to make your heart beat faster. It increases blood flow to the skeletal muscle and to the heart. Again, if I'm getting ready for physical activity, that makes sense. It does cause vasoconstriction in the visceral organs. Remember that I don't care about digesting the breakfast that I had this morning. I don't care about making urine right now. I don't care about ovulating. Those are not important activities right now when it comes to me surviving a bear, right? So I'm going to constrict the blood flow to those places because those places aren't important right now. The other thing that it does, it increases the release of glucose and fatty acids. That's what this is about. Okay, when we talk about the liver and the fat cells, there's an increase in glucose and fatty acid release, or there's an increase in the release of glucose and fatty acids. Why? If I'm going to run for a long period of time, if I'm going to do anything like that for a long period of time, my body has to have fuel. So if I don't have fuel, I don't have a way to actually do that. So my liver releases glucose, it releases fatty acids. My fat cells will also start releasing fatty acids. That puts fuel into my bloodstream. So the adrenal cortex, the outside of my M&M. We've got three types of steroid hormones produced here, which means that they are going to be lipid soluble. They all have a similar structure to steroids and are derived from cholesterol. Every steroid hormone that you learn about is going to be derived from cholesterol. Because of that, they're lipid soluble. They're not stored in the cell, but they're basically made as needed. They're transported via transport proteins. And they're metabolized actually in the liver, so they're broken down in the liver, and they're excreted as part of either the bile or the urine. They bind to intracellular receptors to stimulate the synthesis of specific proteins responsible for producing cellular responses. This is not new information. as far as how lipid-soluble hormones work. We just talked about this in chapter 17. Lipid-soluble hormones don't just float around in the blood. They have to be attached to a transport protein. And their receptor is inside of my cell because it can bypass the membrane of that cell. Again, not new information. So the hormones are made as needed, right? They're not stored. The zona glomerulosa makes mineralocorticoids. Fasciculata makes glucocorticoids. The reticularis makes adrenal androgens. So the zona glomerulosa makes mineralocorticoids. What do those do? Well, believe it or not, they target most tissues in the body. There's an increase in fat and protein breakdown, an increase in glucose production, and it inhibits the immune response and will decrease inflammation. So again, body's getting ready for physical activity. There's a cougar in the parking lot, right? So I'm going to start breaking down fat. I'm going to start breaking down protein. I'm going to increase glucose production. Now, this is kind of an interesting thing. I'm going to inhibit the immune system? Really? Have you ever noticed that when you're the most stressed out is usually the time when you get sick? Yeah, this is why. The thing about fight or flight, the thing about that part of your autonomic nervous system is it shouldn't last long. We're talking about getting out of a bad situation, getting away from the cougar that's in the parking lot, working out for 45 minutes. We're not talking about something that should last for days or weeks or months, right? So let's say that you have a job and your job is stressful and you go to work every day and your boss is terrible and he or she puts you into fight or flight mode whenever you go into work. And you know that you're going to go back to work tomorrow. So you're in fight or flight mode even when you're at home. That extended period of being in that fight or flight gear means that this lasts for a long time. Instead of being something that lasts, let's say, for an hour of working out, now you're in that mode for days and weeks. Well, if you inhibit the immune system and you get exposed to something during that time frame, the immune system isn't working full force to kind of prevent you from getting sick, so you get sick. So yeah, if you've ever wondered why you get sick at the most inopportune times, ta-da! So the zona fasciculata, like I said, it releases glucocorticoids. Glucocorticoids have one target, the kidney. They increase sodium, potassium, and hydrogen ion excretion by the kidney. Okay, so they're letting go of sodium, potassium, and hydrogen ions. But they also enhance water reabsorption. So we're bringing water back. We're not letting it go in the urine in the kidney. Zona reticularis, adrenal androgens. Adrenal androgens do target quite a few tissues. In males, it's not really that important. There's some minor things, but nothing really, stands out. For females, though, adrenal androgens are involved in the development of secondary sex characteristics. So we're talking about the development of the breasts, the fact that the hips flare out and you get hips, the fact that you get hair under your armpits and in your pubic area. These are influenced by the adrenal androgens being released by the zona reticularis. So the pancreas. It lies between the greater curvature of the stomach and the duodenum or duodenum, depending on how you learned it, which is the beginning of the small intestine. So here's the beginning of the small intestine. This is my pancreas. It looks like a little worm that's trying to snuggle into the duodenum. The head lies closest to the duodenum over here. The body extends out toward the spleen, which is actually back here. It functions as both an exocrine and an endocrine gland, which is actually kind of unique. The testes do that, but this is the only other thing that I know of that does both. So we've got the exocrine function. The exocrine function involves these little flower petal cells out here. So they produce something called the pancreatic juice, which I know sounds nasty, but it's what it's called. And you've got a duct that carries that pancreatic juice into or onto the surface of the small intestine. So remember that exocrine glands secrete something onto a surface. Well, these are basically making enzymes to help us digest our food and then secreting them onto the surface of the small intestine. Okay, so that's exocrine function. However, it also has endocrine function with these little dudes right here. These are the pancreatic islets. Okay, they secrete hormones into the circulatory system. So they are not secreting onto a surface, they're going into the blood. So like I said, it does double duty. It's got part of it that works on the exocrine function and another part that works on the endocrine function. So in the pancreatic islets, within the pancreatic islets, we have three different types of cells. We've got alpha cells, we've got beta cells, and we've got delta cells, okay? So alpha cells secrete glucagon specifically. It's a small peptide hormone, and only about 20% of the cells in a pancreatic islet are going to be alpha. Beta cells secrete insulin. Again, small protein with 2 polypeptide chains. 75% of the cells here are going to be beta cells. Now, the delta cells. They secrete something called somatostatin. Somatostatin is a small polypeptide hormone. Sorry. That remaining 5% of cells inside a pancreatic islet are delta cells. So let's talk about those. We've got the pancreas. It's an exocrine gland. It's an endocrine gland. Exocrine-wise, we're secreting enzymes onto the surface of the small intestine to help us digest food. Endocrine-wise, we've got the pancreatic islets that have the alpha, the beta, and the delta cells. Alpha cells. When your body is experiencing low blood glucose, if there are certain amino acids in your bloodstream, or you have sympathetic stimulation. What's sympathetic? Fight or flight. It will release glucagon, or they will release glucagon. Low blood glucose, certain amino acids, sympathetic stimulation. I don't have enough sugar in my blood. Glucagon gets released. Its targets. The liver first. It actually goes to the liver. The liver makes glycogen, which is a complex sugar, and it basically says, hey, that glycogen that you just made, I want you to go on ahead and start breaking that down for me. So it starts breaking down this glycogen into glucose and increases the glucose levels in the blood. It also increases glucose formation from certain amino acids and some fats. So what am I ultimately doing at this point? I'm making glucose. I'm putting glucose back into the blood. Both of these top two bullets are all about making glucose and putting it there. You do have increased fatty acid metabolism, and that actually results in increased ketones in the blood as well. So, what's the ultimate goal here? I want more glucose in the blood. With adipocytes, it also causes the breakdown of fats. Again, I'm putting fuel into the blood. When do I not want glucagon released? If I already have high blood glucose. There's no reason for me to release glucagon, whose job it is to make the amount of glucose in my blood higher if I already have high blood glucose. There's no reason to do that. So when does it get released? When my blood glucose is low, when certain amino acids are present, or when I'm going through sympathetic stimulation. Why sympathetic stimulation? What am I going to need to run away from the cougar in the parking lot? Fuel. This and this give me fuel so that I can make ATP and get away from the cougar in the parking lot. Okay, so that was the alpha cells. Let's talk about beta cells. If there is an increase in blood glucose or certain amino acids or GI tract hormones, basically hormones from my digestive system saying, hey, we just ate, the beta cells will release insulin. Target tissues, again, there are several. Skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, cartilage, bone, fibroblasts, leukocytes, mammary glands. All of them will start taking glucose out of the blood, so they increase their glucose uptake. They will start making glycogen being our complex sugar that you take glucose and start building this big, huge complex sugar. It also increases the uptake of certain amino acids. So I've got too much blood glucose. I need to start getting rid of it. How do I get it out of the blood? These guys start soaking it up like a sponge. If it's in those cells, it's not in my bloodstream. The liver. It increases glycogen synthesis and increases glycolysis, glyco-sugar lysis breakdown. So not only am I taking it out and building my complex glycogen molecule, I'm also taking it out and breaking it down. So you've got basically, again, I'm taking it out of the bloodstream and I'm either making it into something different, the glycogen, or I'm literally breaking it apart so it's not there anymore. The adipocytes, they will also increase glucose uptake. They will increase glycogen synthesis. If it is so much extra sugar that even them doing glycogen synthesis isn't enough, they'll actually start making it into fat. They will increase fatty acid uptake and they will increase glycolysis. Again, sugar breakdown. The nervous system. Increase glucose uptake into the satiety center. Satiety means satisfied. So the satiety center of your brain tells you when to stop eating. If you are, you have enough food in you, this is the part of your brain that goes, you're good, you don't need to have any more. So if you look at all of these, every single one of these examples, right? All of them are designed to get glucose out of your bloodstream. That is what insulin is doing, because what started it, there was too much blood glucose. So all of these things are basically reducing the amount of glucose in the blood. When does it stop? Or when does it not happen? Well, if you've got low blood glucose to begin with, and you start taking it out, you're going to have somebody in a coma. So if there's low blood glucose, insulin doesn't happen. You don't release insulin. Somatostatin can also influence how insulin is released. So let's talk delta cells. Delta cells release somatostatin. The targets are actually the alpha and beta cells of the pancreas. So it inhibits both insulin and glucagon secretion. If you're actually in homeostasis, in that perfect balance level of glucose in your blood, I don't want to increase it, I don't want to decrease it, I don't want alpha and beta working then, because if they do, that balance is going to be disrupted. So when I'm in balance, my pancreas releases somatostatin, basically telling alpha and beta, I don't need you right now.